Welcome to this Field of Glory video. Today I'm going to be talking about generals in Field of Glory 2. A critically important topic. I found that it wasn't until I fully understand how to move generals around and use them that I began to win games against human opponents. In this video we'll first of all cover what the types of generals are and what you can do with them. Then we'll talk about some hints and tips for deployment, organization and the start of your turn. Then we'll go to movement and combat, and finally the end of the turn, what you can do then. There are three things you can do with generals in Field of Glory 2. The first one is that within the command radius of the general, they allow one extra 45-degree turn per unit. This may not sound like much, but if you can get your unit into a position where it can move and then turn, and that when it finishes the turn it's facing an enemy unit in the flank, it means the following turn they can charge it in the flank, which is quite important. The next thing they can do is they can rally units. So if a unit has lost cohesion and is disrupted or fragmented, if you put a general with it, it will guarantee that that unit will attempt to rally at the beginning of the next turn. It doesn't improve the morale of the unit though, it just makes sure that the general will attempt to rally the unit. The third thing that a general can do is make units fight better. So units have a command radius and an inspiration radius. When the general gets into combat, the command radius disappears and it becomes an inspiration radius. And this means that units within a quarter of the general's normal command radius get +1 in cohesion tests. The other thing that happens is that if a general is attached to a unit and it's in combat, the unit gets +50 POA. And these are very important differences. If you can get your generals into the right locations at the right time, it will win you the game. There are three types of generals in Field of Glory 2, the Commander-in-Chief, the Sub-General and the Allied General. A Commander-in-Chief has a much larger command radius than the others and can command any troops in his army. He can do this whether he's got a command allocated to him or not, but basically there's no need to allocate a command to him. A sub-general must have a command allocated to him. If you don't allocate a command to him, he'll just have himself as his command, and he won't be able to affect anything much. Allied generals are like commander-in-chiefs, at least in the negative effects if they're killed, but they can only affect troops of their own nationality, or that is troops within their command. They may also have the positive effects of a commander-in-chief in that they have a wider inspiration radius. There are three grades of commander. That is the troop commander, the field commander, and the great commander. And you probably will most of the time just see the first two, because in a custom battle the CNC is graded as a field commander with 8 squares, and sub-generals are graded as troop commanders with 4 squares. But if you play Field of Glory Empires, or if you play a scenario, you may see sub-generals with the 8-square command radius. Remember, of course, that if you get into combat, the command radius falls to 0. In fact, it completely disappears, in other words. You cannot influence movement of units while you're in combat. However, while you are in combat, you get the inspiration radius. If a general is killed or wounded, all friendly units within a square if he's a sub-general, or 2 squares if he's a general, a CNC or allied general, must take a cohesion test. The number of generals you get is determined by the number of troops you have, where they're located, and what types of troops they are. But basically, you should get 4 generals in each battle. If you initially get 3 generals or 2 generals, you will be offered the option to add the extra generals before starting the game. And the game will also warn you if you try to start the game without them that you could have added them. Make sure you have the full number of generals possible. To find out what the command radius is of a general, make sure you've got the toolbar showing the bottom right hand corner of the screen, and then click on the general and then click on the command radius button. The command is then shown as a shaded area on the battlefield around the general. The Commander-in-Chief's radius being much wider than the others means that he should be placed in the center so you can gain the full benefit from it. Before you allocate troops to your general, you must decide on a plan of attack. Then you can decide what commands you need, and you can fit your organization to suit your attack. So divide the battlefield into sectors and allocate generals to each sector. Allocate most generals to the strike team, and usually you have a main attack type situation, and usually you put about 3 to 6 units to a general if it's a medium-sized battle, and put maybe only 1 general if you have a delaying command. Just give it one general, and then if you have another command, say that's doing a flank attack, then give that all the rest of the generals. Do not allocate troops to your CNC, as he can command any troops, and always put your generals in the front rank. Light troops, as I mentioned, maybe should have mentioned, because they get an automatic 45-degree turn, it's often thought unnecessary to allocate light troops to a command. But if you want to have the benefit of the inspiration radius while the general is in combat, if they're close enough, then it may be worth putting them in a command. In this example, the plan is not to go near the hill at the top of the screen, but to use cavalry superiority to sweep around the enemy left flank and use the pikes and elephants to assault the center. This gives us 3 sectors. So sector 1, we expect the enemy will beat us here, but we will try to hold them back. So we'll just give them 1 general. That's my low priority. Sector 2, this is our main attack, so it's a high priority. We'll give it at least 2 generals, including the Commander-in-Chief. And Sector 3, that's our flanking attack, and depending on how the battle goes, that might actually turn out to be our main attack, so we'll give it all of our remaining generals. And we should allocate generals to commands with a mixture of unit types, particularly cavalry plus infantry. So if things change, then we can adapt our plans, so we can move the general around between different troop types. It cannot be emphasized too much that everything you do in Field of Glory has to be done in the right order. So there are certain things you can do at the beginning of a turn with your generals. So at the start of the turn, check the location of your generals and see if they can be moved to make a change to some other location, or to charge with them, or to put them in a different combat and make those more likely to succeed. Generals that are not in combat and have not charged this turn can be moved 4 squares to another unit in their command, even if that unit is in combat. So they can't move if they are in combat, but they can move to another unit that is in combat. The command range is determined at the start of the turn. So again, that's another reason why it's important to think about where your general is going to be at the start of the turn. Troops that are in the command range at the start of the turn are in command range until the player's next turn. Moving a general so a unit is in or out of command range does not affect it until the following turn. So if you've got the general in the right place at the start of the turn, you can move all your units how you like without having to worry about whether they'll get that extra turn, extra 45-degree turn or not. And divide your turn into flexible segments so that you don't forget to do things in the right order. You can either move a general with the unit to which he's attached, or you can move him independently 4 squares. So let's just show you how you do that. So the first thing you do, of course, is click on the general. The next bit is a bit more tricky because when you move your pointer now, you'll get the option to either move a unit or move the general, but you'll see the little helmet symbol pop up, and so you click on the helmet symbol on the unit that you want to move the general to, and the general will be moved to that unit. In this example, the CNC was with a pike unit, so when we clicked on his unit initially, the option to form a square came up. We just ignored that and moved the pointer to the other unit, and we got the option to move the general to that location. Generals do not have to be with the unit to affect that unit's movement. The unit just has to have been in the general's command radius at the start of the turn. If you're unsure whether a unit is within the general's command radius or not, check its information panel at the bottom of the screen, and if it says reduced CC, then it's out of the general's command radius, and you will have to move it so that it is there at the start of the next turn in order to receive the additional turning move. Generals don't usually die unless things are going bad for them or they've been put with light troops. So don't put them with light troops, and if you're going to charge them into contact, try and make sure you're getting at least an equal odds situation, and that way they'll be safe. But it is worthwhile getting your general into combat as soon as possible, because you get the plus 50 point of advantage, and the units 1 or 2 squares away from you will get the +1 in cohesion tests. When you've got to the end of your turn or close to it, one of the things to think about is, again, where are your generals? Because they need to be in the right place at the start of the next turn. And also, if you place them with a combat at that stage during the enemy's turn, if those combats continue, they will get the benefit of the general's presence. So at the end of the turn, check your general's location. Note that if you put a general with a fragmented unit, it is quite dangerous because putting the general with that unit will give it the plus 50 POA in combat, and it will give it +1 in cohesion tests, but it'll only get the +1 in cohesion tests if it is in combat. So if it's not in combat, it won't make the fragmented unit have better morale. And if for some reason the fragmented unit is charged, then you could lose both the general and the fragmented unit. So generally think very carefully before you put a general with a fragmented unit in the hope of getting it to rally up to being just disrupted. In this example, we've looked around and found an idle general and a unit that could benefit from his presence. So we've moved the general from the pikeman because we noticed that he was facing up to some peltas, and he didn't need the general to beat up peltas with pikemen. But the Thorakitai next to him were up against an enemy general and heavy infantry, so they needed a general to even out the odds. So this just shows how we move him over. Another thing you might do at the end of your turn is if you see a unit that's lost cohesion and an idle general, maybe you can put the general with that to make it try and rally. But remember that unless the unit is in combat, it doesn't improve the morale. It just means it will guarantee that that unit will attempt to rally every turn that the general is with it. If it's a fragmented unit, probably the best thing you can do is move it as far away as possible from the enemy and just stand still with that unit, and that tends to be, as long as it's got secure flanks, it will probably eventually rally back anyway without you putting the general with it. Okay, so we've come to the end of this video, so let's go over what we've covered in brief. So firstly, allocate your generals to sectors in accordance with your plan. It's very important to have an overarching plan. Your main attack should have most of the generals, and put one general with the delaying force and put the rest of your generals with the supporting or flanking attack. Place the CNC where his wider command radius has the most benefit. This is usually in the center of your line, but sometimes it can be with a flanking force that is widely distributed. Place the CNC last when you are allocating troops to commands, as he can command any troops and does not need to be allocated to a command. At the start of a turn and at the end of the turn, check the location of your generals. There may be something else they can do that will improve your situation. Before charging is one of those situations. So if you're about to charge, think, stop. Can I put a general with this charging unit? Get your generals into combat as soon as possible. They will have a significant effect on morale on combat. It can be what wins you the game. It's just getting your generals right in the right position. And remember that outside of combat, all generals do is ensure that if they are with a unit, they will attempt to rally every turn it has lost cohesion and try and gain a 1 cohesion level. They will just ensure that a unit gets an extra 45-degree turn. And that's only, of course, if the unit is within the command range. And the normal command range for a sub-general is 4 squares, and for a CNC, it is 8 squares. While in combat, that reduces that to 0, and it's replaced by their inspiration ability, and that is a range of 2 squares for the CNC and 1 square for the sub-general. And the inspiration is that they get +1 on cohesion tests. So once again, thanks very much for watching. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about ancient warfare, why not have a look at my book, The Gods of Battle, The Thracians at War. This book covers many aspects of ancient warfare and is especially interesting in that it talks about the transitional period between the Greek hoplite style battle and the sophisticated armies of Alexander the Great. So there's quite a lot in there about light troops and cavalry, and not just about the Thracians.